So actually, it's a very happy moment for me to introduce Jayaram sir and Aravind for conducting this day 2 webinar on journalism, prospects and promises. I would say that sometimes the influence of teachers extends beyond the classroom, well into the future. So that is the same thing I could see when I just go through the relation between Jayaram sir and Aravind. The moment I say there is a webinar, can you just join, sir? So he was like a bit worried and said that, ma'am, you know Jayaram sir, and it's a bit tough moment, but still he have agreed. So it's a very happy moment, and I think the students will be benefited. So I thought of introducing Jayaram sir. He was a visiting professor in our department. I do believe that he will continue his services and contributions because we need his area of expertise. He's a very seasoned journalist. And of course, over 40 years of experience, this is something remarkable. And he has served in various capacities, starting as a reporter, then sub-editor, senior correspondent, special correspondent, foreign correspondent, and also served as diplomatic editor and chief of Bureau of India, Indo-Asian News Service, and as a special correspondent of News, United News of India in Sri Lanka. So I think sir can speak more about this area. Welcome, sir. And now I think I'll just introduce Mr. Aravind Gunasekharan, who is currently serving as a senior special correspondent for NDTV in New Delhi, over 8 years of experience in broadcast media. And he was awarded as one of the best young journalists in the first edition of 40 Under 40 by Exchange for Media in the recent times. Other than that, I think he have bagged a lot of renowned accomplishments. And he, one special thing is, as I already mentioned, he had done his BA in mass communication somewhere in 2011. And very happy to welcome Aravind also to the show. So I think now the platform is open to both the seasoned journalist, Jayaram sir and Aravind. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Over to you, people.
Shall I start? Or Aravind will?
I think you should start, sir. Always a student of yours.
Good evening. I am going to start this talk on the topic of slavery. Why slavery? Slavery has been long since abolished across the world. But you will be surprised. There is a bunch of professionals who willingly opt to remain bonded slaves. I am referring to journalists who are slaves to events. In fact, events determine their professional lives that unfortunately have an impact on their personal lives too. Let me cite an instance. My wife's birthday is on November 27th. Exactly on the night of November 26, 2008, I get a call from my newspaper, the Straits Times of Singapore, asking me to proceed to Mumbai from Delhi to cover the major terrorist strike in the city. I hurriedly pack my bags, laptop, and leave for the airport, leaving a grouchy wife behind. The birthday party is forgotten, and the party we had planned is cancelled. I spent the next few days in Mumbai, reporting the battle between the security forces and the terrorists at different locations, including the iconic Taj Mahal Hotel, Oberoi Trident, the Jewish Center, and the Victoria Terminus. My paper was particularly interested in this because there was a Singaporean national, a lady lawyer, who was among those trapped at the Trident. Unfortunately, she was gunned down by a terrorist as she tried to escape through an emergency exit along with 2 other women guests of the hotel. In all, some 175 people were killed, including foreign nationals, and some 300 injured before the security forces could neutralize the terrorists and the siege could be ended. The grisly sight at the morgue still gives me the shivers, for I have not seen so many bodies piled up at one place, even at the sites of the worst massacres during my long stint in Sri Lanka, covering the ethnic war in that country. Coming back to the point I was making about journalists being slaves to events, I had to confront an angry wife when I returned after covering the Mumbai terrorist strike. Luckily, for me, she did not have an AK-47 in her hand. So many of my journalist colleagues must have had similar experiences when they had to leave suddenly from the midst of a birthday party or a wedding or any function because some MLAs have suddenly decided to switch sides and reduce a government to minority, or a plane has crashed somewhere nearby, or there is a building collapse where an unknown number of people have died. You simply cannot tell the editor, you are at a party, I'll cover it tomorrow. Because news cannot and will not wait. And it is your sacred mission to provide the correct information to your readers or viewers, as the case may be. Journalism is also a highly competitive profession, where speed and accuracy are the yardsticks of competence. I had the privilege of being the first to bring to the world the news about Sri Lankan President Premadasa's assassination on May 1, 1993, by a Tamil Tiger suicide bomber at a May Day parade. Though the blast took place in the morning and everyone feared for the worst, there was no official confirmation about the president's fate. All of us journalists were constantly on the phone with senior officials and ministers to get a word on his condition. Unlike the mobile army of today, journalists made sure that information provided to the reader was checked and rechecked. Finally, as luck would have it, I got Premadasa's press secretary, Ivan Skure, on the phone and asked him about the president. The president died in the blast, he told me. I asked him, how did you know? And he said he was with him seconds before the bomb blast and moved a little distance away to take a call on his mobile phone. That was when the blast triggered by the suicide bomber went off, and the president and some 10 other people near him all perished. My flash those days, that was called breaking news. Did somebody say anything?
Sorry, sir, I'm interrupting you. Please adjust your laptop screen because your face is not visible properly.
My face is not, I think I have to adjust the camera.
Yeah, please.
Is it all right now?
Yeah, it's, thank you. You will continue.
My flash, these days they are called breaking news, was that president was dead, went on the wires and was picked up by international news agencies and the BBC immediately. And I was flooded with congratulatory messages from my editors and colleagues, as it is not every day that an Indian news agency breaks or beats its international rivals in speed in news coverage. When your daily life is entirely decided by the unfolding events, why do youngsters still want to be journalists? The answer is simple. No other profession perhaps provides the thrills and excitement that journalism provides. After all, which profession offers you a ringside seat to the unfolding of history of the modern era? I am sure my young fellow webinarian, Aravind Gunasekharan, will be an object of admiration among his friends, neighbors, and relatives as he appears on primetime news to tell the inside story of the developments in the Home Ministry or the Congress Party or whatever news brief he is covering. I must say, journalism has changed unbelievably from the time I was covering news. Social media has changed the way information is gathered and disseminated, raising the question whether journalism, the craft of gathering and disseminating information, matters anymore. Today, anyone, just anyone with a smartphone at the right or wrong place at the right time is a journalist, instrumental in breaking news through text, video, blogs, pictures, or sites such as Facebook and other microblogs or Twitter. The development raises a serious question. Who is the journalist of the future? And how would a newsroom of the future look like? With a flood of stories on any event or issue out there in the social media, dissected, debated, and analyzed, a reporter is hard-pressed to find a new angle or exclusive information. Words like scoops and breaking news have already lost their relevance because the web is already full of it, trending on social network. While these technological advances offer tremendous opportunity for journalism, there are potential pitfalls. The news breaking stories have often turned out to be what has come to be known as fake news, or a case of speed at the cost of truth, as they are often based on hearsay, rumors, and hoaxes. The social media present awesome opportunities for the new media, but at the same time poses high risk for errors. Only a trained and objective journalist like Aravind can sift through the flood of information and give a factual account to the readers or viewers, as the case may be. I am sure Arvind's regular appearance on the TV's, NDTV's Prime News, and those of other regular faces on national and regional TV channels would induce many youngsters to take up journalism in the mistaken impression that there is glamour to the profession. But a note of caution to all those who think that a journalist job is simply simple and glamorous. They may assume that if you are a reporter, TV reporter like Aravind, you just need to stand in front of the camera and give an account of an event. And if you are a reporter of a newspaper, hammer out a few paragraphs as you please. Not many would know that before appearing in front of the camera or writing a report, the reporter would have spent hours checking and double checking facts, speaking to ministers, MPs, or sources about the developments to ensure that correct information and only correct information is given to the public. Journalism aspirants may also not know that the reporter would have spent hours outside a venue, rain or shine, to get that bite from some participant that lends veracity to the reports. So if you think there is glamour in the profession, I suggest a rethink. But I still say journalism is perhaps one of the most exciting professions. Like I said earlier, where else do you get a ringside seat to unfolding developments in your city, country, or the world at large? You are an eyewitness to history in the making. I still recall traveling with the media team that accompanied Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee on his historic bus journey to Lahore in February 1999 in his bid for peace with our neighbor. That trip was also an eye-opener to some of us journalists who used the opportunity to visit the famous Anarkali Bazaar in Lahore. Not only did we not encounter any antagonism or antipathy from the shopkeepers or public, we were received as long lost friends. The shopkeepers offered attractive discounts when they learned we were Indians, and other shoppers came and shook hands with us and welcomed us to their country. Did somebody say something? All right. Journalism is also a profession which teaches you to treat the king or the VIP and the common man with equal respect and equanimity, because both are sources of information for you that is of public interest. It also makes you a skeptic, but not a cynic, mind you, and teaches you to question authority about their words and deeds. In the pursuit of factual information, you are not overawed by positions. Like someone said, journalism is a profession, not a profession founded on starry-eyed optimism. It teaches us to question human actions and decisions. It scorns the uplifter and it suspects the reformer, having had grievous experiences with both in the course of his daily dealings with human affairs. If I am getting long, please tell me. Ashwati?
Sir,
Yes, sir.
it's
Yes,
always
sir.
a pleasure to hear you.
Journalism also takes you to places which one would have never visited otherwise. In my case, I had served in the Northeast, trekked the rolling hills in the region along the China border, covered the insurgency there before moving to Sri Lanka as a foreign correspondent to cover the ethnic strife in that country. I have had the opportunity to travel with the media team accompanying both Prime Minister Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh on the state visits abroad. I have also been stranded in Kabul for nearly a month, following what was to be a 3-day visit to the Afghan capital, days after the US military intervention in that country in 2001. One day you are in Israel, another in Taiwan, and yet another walking on the Great Wall of China, being the recipient of invitations from the governments of those countries. Pardon me? Who want you to see and hopefully write about the developments in the country for the benefit of Indian readers. A sports correspondent, for instance, traveled with the national cricket team during his tour abroad to cover the Olympics and other exciting international sporting events. A defense correspondent gets to visit front lines even when hostilities are on. You must have seen Indian journalists giving a live account of the war in Ukraine on our TV channels. Seeing such developments through Indian eyes gives a different perspective about the developments, which are very different from what we get from foreign news sources. But like I said, there is a price to pay for such excitement. Your job may affect your social life at times, but I doubt if any journalist really minds that, because the fun and excitement that your assignments give are unparalleled. And you are sought after by friends and neighbors, because everyone is keen to get the inside story of what is going on. Who but a journalist is better equipped to tell them? Of course, as a print journalist, I had only one complaint. After all those exciting trips and assignments, I had to write about them. And writing has always been a pain and a pleasure when you get the right words and are able to tell the story with clarity. Before I pass on the platform, Aravind, here is a word of caution. When you send messages on your cell phone, make sure to revise it before you press the send button. Otherwise, great misunderstandings can result. I tell this to my students, like what happened to the son-in-law of a rich businessman. You see, the wedding of his daughter, before the wedding of his daughter, the businessman sent a message to his prospective son-in-law, asking him what would he like from him as a wedding gift. The son-in-law promptly responded. And after the wedding, the father-in-law approached this young man. He said, son, I was surprised by what you asked for. Anyway, it is my duty to fulfill your wish. So here it is. So saying, he handed over a small parcel to him. The young man opened the parcel and angrily dashed the phone on his Apple phone on the ground, shouting, bloody iPhone. You see, inside the parcel were 4 underwears, whereas what he had asked for was a Ford Endeavor, the big sports utility vehicle. The phone auto-corrected it to 4 underwears. On that note, here is Aravind to tell you about the challenges and pleasures of modern journalism. Aravind.
Thank you, sir. It's always a wonderful feeling to be back at your college, revisiting those good old days. And it's always a wonderful feeling to speak on any event that has been organized by Amrita, where I laid the foundation for my career, that is the journalism. And Professor Jayaram sir, who's not an individual per se, but an institution himself or itself in the field of journalism. I still remember those days where I have never seen Jayaram sir giving us a theoretical lecture of journalism during our days. In fact, every time either he will ask us to go out, venture out and get a story, report a story, or sometime when it's a classroom assignment, he would give us the PIB releases, Press Information Bureau releases, asking us to make a report from those PIB releases. I didn't understand, I didn't realize that's the journalism. In fact, after coming to the mainstream journalism, I feel I see with a sad feeling that journalism has been actually reduced to just making a news story right and out from the PIB releases. So Jayaram sir, in fact, not just on the good side of journalism, he also taught us what the bad journalism is also and what we should not do. In fact, whenever he gives us a PIB releases, he will also ask us to ensure that the crux of the story should be, the crux of the PIB release should be the story. And he has also always maintained to us that a journalist should not just parrot the views of the government. In fact, he should speak, or he or she should speak the voice of the voiceless. So thanks for mentoring us and for guiding us to be a good journalist. And in fact, whatever I learned from you, that is helping even today, that not just today, I think in the future, whenever, till the day that I be a journalist, it'll always be something that your words will be this guiding light for us. So thanks, and thanks Amrita for giving us this opportunity, and thanks a lot. So coming to the topic, the life or what is modern day journalism all about. So journalism has been the present day journalism, and the journalism in the current era can be divided into 2 parts. One, a journalist who speak the voice of the government, or those other side where they call the journalists as activists. So it's just 2 kinds of journalism that we are seeing in India. There is a group that is just parroting the views of the government, and there is another group where the people criticize, saying that they are not doing journalism per se, but they are just doing activism. But a good journalist or a journalist per se should be just speaking about the facts, not the opinion. The moment you take your pen as a print journalist, or the moment you hold the mic as a broadcast journalist, you should always be clear that you should just report the facts, like how Jayaram sir used to tell us in our classroom. So that's something that is missing in the current day journalism, and that's why journalism is like Jayaram sir explained, it's not a rosy picture outside, but it's full of very difficult phases that Indian journalism is going through. But journalism is this one service that India needs: credible, good journalists for the democracy to thrive. So that's something that we all should, all people who are doing, who want to take up this field of journalism should always keep this in mind. India is in dire need of journalists. A good journalist who's just report on the facts, not just parrot the views of the government, not just do the activism, but just report on the facts. So the people around, they'll get to know what exactly is happening around. That's something at a time like this, polarizing times, where it's on communal lines, on let it be on the caste lines, let it be on the language lines. It's very polarizing time. It's a duty of a journalist just to bring the facts to the people so that they get to know what is happening around. So coming to the modern journalism, like Jayaram sir explained, like the social life is something that you can't afford when you be a journalist, that too as a broadcast journalist, because this is a 24/7 job, or 24/7 profession. I'm on vacation now. In fact, I'm sitting at my own hometown. I'm sitting at my own home. But as Jayaram sir was speaking, in fact, even I wanted to listen to Jayaram sir, because it's been almost 8 years since I listened to Jayaram sir. Even I wanted to listen to Jayaram sir. But that's where the moment you get a flash, the moment you get a news, you are a journalist, so you have to flash that. Even now, as I was listening to Jayaram sir, we did get a message from one of the sources saying that Mamata Banerjee, the West Bengal chief minister, the TMC chief, she has written to almost 22 opposition leaders, calling for a meeting on June 15th to discuss or to decide on the deliberate on the strategy for the presidential election. So even when you are on leave, even when you are on vacation, even when you are when you are not doing your job, when you're not in the field, but a journalism job is a 24 hours job. You have to be always watchful for the things or for the information that is happening around, so that you can be the first one to break it. Because journalism, with this 24 hours, 24/7 broadcast TV journalism, so every minute is something that you have to prove yourself. It's not just one day you write a story and the next 1 week you don't need to do anything. No, this is a 24 hours channel, news channel. So I'm speaking more about a broadcast journalism. So every channel has a bulletin for almost every hour, at least 30 minutes bulletin every hour. In fact, some channels have this continuous live coverage. So every hour there is a 60 minutes, and you have to fill the bulletins with news. So you have to be very careful with what's happening around. And coming to the due deliberation that Jayaram sir has started, that we learned from Amrita, that something is not actually happening in the modern day journalism, because the information that we collect, that we get now, it has been very restricted, because the information that we get is very restricted in some cases, where a premeditated or some kind of a choreographed information is being given to parroted to the government, to the journalists, in the kind of press readouts or like handouts, which journalists blindly copy paste and then make it as a news. But that's not journalism per se, because every story, let it be any story, but every story will have at least two sides to it. You get an information from any of your source, you have to make it sure that you cross verify it with the other stakeholder which is connected to that particular story, which is not actually happening in the modern day journalism. That the future journalists, you all should always keep in mind. Any information that you get, yeah, you have to break it first, all said and done, but you should also reach out to the other side of that particular story to get their response. I still have this experience wherein I got an information from one of my sources, where I cover CBI, Enforcement Directorate, etc. One of my sources from CBI gave me this very important information that they have received a complaint from a bank against a very big businessman for alleged bank fraud. The moment I got this information, because this was very credible information that I got from my source, so I readily went out, because this is a very big information, because that particular businessman has been in the news for quite some time. It's a very big name in the market. The moment I got an information that one of the public sector banks has written a complaint to the Central Bureau of Investigation, alleging that this particular businessman, along with this company, has allegedly defrauded banks to the tune of somewhere around 8,000 crore. The moment I got this information, I put out this information. I wanted my office to go big on it. And in fact, I was pushing my office to go for the information. But even I forgot the very basic of journalism, that I should also reach out to the other party, that is this particular businessman or their media communication team, to ask for their particular response. But because the name is big, we didn't want to wait for more. We didn't want to delay this particular information, because there is every bit of chance that this particular information might go to some other journalist, your competitor might flash it. So that's something, there'll be peer pressure all along. But always have this due diligence, but you should always reach out to the opposite side. But I didn't do that particular thing at that particular hour. And then we went big on this particular news. The very next day, I got a 5,000 crore defamation suit or a defamation notice from this very big businessman. I made this one mistake, that I didn't reach out to this particular company, but still one thing that I ensured this particular information was correct or something that I did. But point is, as a journalist, we should always reach out to the other particular side. Then we had to use all our legal services. We had to give a legal response to them. Luckily, that man did not file a formal case. In fact, that ended with a legal, just as a notice from his legal team, because the information that I got from my source was credible enough. But still, I made a technical mistake wherein, though that particular company was of this particular businessman, because that particular company got into this insolvency, so he is not the director of that particular company anymore. So I missed out doing that particular due diligence, and that costed me with a 5,000 crore legal notice. Luckily, it didn't go to a case. So this is a lesson that however hurry you are in a hurry, that you have to put up the information first, but always make sure that you reach out to the other side of the story. It's not just that that you need to play this safe, etc., but it is also morally your duty that you should also reach out to the other side. So coming to other issues or difficulties that as a journalist I face in the current days. So that would be really helpful for all the future journalists. One, the information that we get in the present time is very, very limited, because it's not that earlier we used to see information is flooded. We can get for a one story, we'll get information. We'll have sources at many places, and we can corroborate those information, and then we can put out the story. Many a times, most of the information that we get in the present day is from the government sources. Let it be, it's almost a WhatsApp forward. This particular mobile phone has been more. The more we can call it as a boon for the modern day journalism, it has also been a ban for us, because the information that most of the information that is being given by the government sources or any of the sources in the establishment, those are mere WhatsApp forward. So the moment the information they just put it on the group, and people readily copy paste it, and then they flash it. The moment one of your competitive channel flash that particular information, your editor will be on your neck asking for the information or asking for the news. That's where you'll fall into this peer pressure. Always ensure WhatsApp or the mobile is not your primary source. You can get an information through WhatsApp or through any of this media, but always ensure that you have a primary source for any information. A fellow journalist can never be your primary source. Now, I can see in my colleagues, most of the time, one gets an information, he just shares that information on a WhatsApp group, where informal WhatsApp group, where several other journalists are part of that group. The people readily copy paste it, and then every channel will blindly flash that particular news. But that's not journalism. A fellow journalist can never be your primary source. A primary source should be a person who's directly connected to a particular story. To develop a source, it's a painstaking effort. You have to reach out to that particular source. Maintaining a source is like maintaining a relationship. You can't out of blue moon, you can't call this particular source one day asking for information, and then again you can call him or her back again a month or two afterwards, and again call for an information. No, you have to be constantly in touch with your source. Only then you can build this particular trust. You have to meet the sources. You have to gain this particular trust. Once you gain the trust, you have to ensure that you hold this particular trust. A source, if a source is giving you an information, he's putting his career at risk, because not every government servant is at liberty to give an information. Only press information officers at every department or at every ministry is authorized to give information. When an officer is coming out of line and giving an information, you should always ensure that you should protect your source. You protect your source, you choose your source wisely, because if your source is wrong, when you go blindly by your primary source, if your source is wrong, your entire story collapses. Always choose your story, you choose your primary source very carefully. The moment you choose your primary source very carefully, then trust the source, get the information, and hold the trust. The moment you start developing sources, then you can break many stories. So for any stories, for any successful journalist, this only asset is the source. Sources are the people that make you or break you as a journalist. If your source is solid, you will make some solid news stories. So always look for sources, and never ever make your fellow journalist as a source. It's not just he might give you a wrong information or something. If you are making your fellow journalist as your primary source, then you will always be second in your story, because your fellow journalist will always put out the story first in his or her own media on TV channel, and only then he will share the information to you. So never ever make your fellow journalist as your source. Also, very importantly, even if your fellow journalist, when you venture out into the mainstream media, even if your fellow journalist is giving an information to you, always look for the source for that particular story. The moment you get an information, if your office is saying that this particular channel is breaking this story, or this particular channel is reporting this particular story, look for the source of that particular story. Don't look for this particular story alone, but who might be the source who would have given this particular information to this particular source, to this particular channel, and then reach out to that particular source so that you can build your own rapport with that source, so that you can also break stories. Also, coming to the other very important point, like due diligence is something that whenever you get an information, always cross verify with a second source. Also reach out to the other person so that you get their response. That's one. That's ethical journalism. Very, very important. Second thing, sources. Building a source or choosing a source is something that you have to be very careful. These two are the mistakes that we see very often in the modern day journalism, where people, they are not doing it very correct. And of late, we are also seeing a kind of pressure in most, let's say, the Sushant Singh Rajput case. We did see in a case where the editors, the people above you, when you start as a journalist, you will be given beat, but there are editors above your level. There are some cases where people outside your organization, or people from the government or from any of the establishment, they might be in directly touch with your editor, and they might give information to your editor directly, and the editor will pass it on to you. But even when your editor is passing on the information to you, but as a journalist, when you are going out, when you are reporting the story, it's your story. Don't fall for the pressure. Your office will put all kind of pressure on you to report this particular story, saying that this has been received by the editor, etc. But reach out to your source. If you have a source in that particular beat, reach out to your source, get the information cross-checked once or twice, and then report this information. So that's very, very important. That's something that we are facing as journalists. We are facing of late way too much. Also, coming back to the topic which I started, saying that facts, that always a journalist should always restrict to the facts. The moment you take a pen as a print journalist, the moment you hold the mic as a broadcast journalist, always stick to the facts. You will have so many opinions on that particular story, but the moment you put out your opinion into the story, then the story will lose its value, because any news story should always have the facts, not the opinion, not any judgment, because a journalist is not a judge here. Our job is just to report, get the facts from one particular source, and then disseminate it or share it to the viewers or the audience. Because every viewer, every audience, the moment they watch you, they watch us with so much of trust. So we should hold that responsibility and accountability when we deliver a news. There should not be any personal opinion that should be mixed in the news. This is something that Jayaram sir has always taught us in our class. Every time, whenever there is a theoretical class, he will say that no story, when you are a journalist, you cannot mix your opinion into the story. But that's something which we are not seeing in the modern day journalism. Look at all the prime time debates. Let's start the so-called the 9 p.m. judges. All these people, all the so-called star anchors, let's see across the board, I'm saying all these anchors, all the editors, anchors who do the prime time, it's something that we are missing. We are not doing just the story. We are not just putting the facts out. In fact, we are trying to set an agenda through the facts, or trying to put our own opinion. That's not journalism, and that's why India desperately needs journalists who just report facts, not the opinion, not the voice of the government, or just parroting the views of the government, or just merely doing activism. Our job is just to collect the facts from one particular source and then put it before the people. Let the people take the call. Let's just put the story. The facts will make a better story than your opinion. You put the facts out, people has the ability to come to a conclusion, not pass any judgment. But alas, most of the star anchors we see on the television, they are passing judgment, and that's why the value or the respect of broadcast journalism or the TV journalism is diminishing day by day. It's time that young journalists come out and hold this journalism at the flag of journalism high. When Jayaram sir explained how he flashed certain very important information when he was on duty in Sri Lanka, when he was reporting on the peak of LTTE war in Sri Lanka. Those were the days when there were no mobile phones. People used to mostly communicate through emails, if I'm not wrong. So even they were breaking stories, like how Jayaram sir explained to us when he broke that particular story. He was the first one to break the story, not just from India, but also several foreign outlets, agencies copied that story. That was a wire that he sent. So technologies at times will help us, but technology, don't just rely on technologies. Just don't see WhatsApp or just see Twitter, see some feed on Twitter and just copy paste and then make it as a news. Twitter, Facebook is all flooded with information, but those are not actual journalist stories. There will be so many facts, but getting a crux of a story is something that you have to read more. Only if you understand the story, you can put out the story so that your viewers can understand it. So that's something that every young journalist or journalist who step out should be very careful of. So like we have been taught in Amrita, read more. Every day, read more newspapers. The more you read newspapers, you will get to know what is happening around. So that will help us in following a story. In fact, when something is happening, all of a sudden, when you get an information that Mamata Banerjee has called for a meeting of opposition parties on June 15th, this will be just one particular information. But but this is just an information. But how can we put this as a story out? Because that is something that is a precursor to it, and that will be something that will be happening subsequently also. If you could read that particular list, in that particular list, Sonia Gandhi name is written in the 9th. The list starts with Aravind Kejriwal, Delhi Chief Minister, and it goes with Uddhav Thackeray and also Sitaram Yechuri, etc., etc. But Sonia Gandhi name is written as the 9th name in this particular list. Though it's the information that Mamata Banerjee has written to the opposition parties, calling for a meeting on June 15th to discuss the strategy for the presidential elections, but there is also story inside this particular list that Sonia Gandhi name is in the 9th. We all know Sonia Gandhi, the Congress party. Sonia Gandhi is the president of the Congress party, and Congress party is a national party, whereas Aam Aadmi Party are so-called other parties. Most of the other parties are regional parties. But because the Congress is losing its shine or is continuous setback in the electoral politics, the Congress party is also losing its shine, and the tussle between the Trinamool Congress and Congress chief Sonia Gandhi is also a lesson, is also a story. So all this small information one should always be very careful about, because those also will make a kind of a story. If you could see, because earlier we did hear that Sonia Gandhi had reached out to Mamata Banerjee and also Sitaram Yechuri and also Sharad Pawar, asking deputing Mallikarjuna Kharge to reach out to all these people to take this decision forward. In such a case, now Mamata Banerjee is also spearheading this opposition unity, wherein she is trying to bring to a separate opposition party. Though this is a news, but there will be so many other information that will be part of press release or some kind of information that you get from so-called political parties, which can make stories all together. So there are several beats coming to beats. There are several beats. Let it be a crime beat, let it be an investigative beat, let it be a political beat, or let it be health beat, education beat, etc. Every journalist, the moment you step to a mainstream media, you have to choose your beat. So your beat, you have to ensure that you read your beat very carefully. When you go into investigative beat, there'll be so many agencies like CBI, like Enforcement Directorate, like Income Tax Department. So all these departments, all these agencies will have their own statute. So the moment you choose a beat, you should also read it thoroughly, so that the moment, even when you get an information, you can put together, you can see what is the content of the story. Because when you put out an information, you will get all kinds of technical information from your sources. When you put the same outside, people, the viewers or audience might not be able to understand it. So you have to put it in a context to it. When searches are happening, when the Central Bureau of Investigation or ED is conducting searches on the day when the Rajya Sabha elections are happening, that also makes a context where they are conducting searches. Are they conducting searches in the poll-bound states? Who are they targeting? If they are targeting only the opposition parties, how the opposition parties are calling it, whether they are calling it as a political vendetta. So all this, you have to see the context of each and every development that is happening. So read very well. Every day you have to read the newspapers so that you can understand, or you can see what is happening around, so that you can sell your story more strongly. So coming to broadcast journalism, you don't need to shout to be heard. In fact, when you put the facts correct, when you break stories, when you continuously break stories, or when you report stories that make an impact, you will start getting the credibility, and people will start hearing you. when I started my journalism, I started in a Tamil news channel called NDTV. I worked there for almost 4 years. I was working in a Tamil news channel. People think that you need a platform to move from one particular channel to the other channel. I worked for almost 4.5 years in the Tamil news channel in the national capital. But in 2019, I got an opportunity offer from the NDTV. That's a national English channel. So people will think that you have to sell yourself, or you have to walk extra mile for people to see you. That's not the case. When you do good journalism, when you just consistently, when you report stories that makes an impact, when you break stories, people will recognize you. That's how I also moved from a Tamil channel called Tanti TV to NDTV. So all these are small things that you have to always be careful about. There'll be so many distractions all around, but stick to the basics. One, there are 5 W's and 1 H. That's the basic thing that we all have been taught in journalism. So every story will have 5 W's and 1 H. Always look for these 6 questions in a story, and always see how this particular story can benefit the people or can make an impact. You don't need an appreciation or someone in the establishment or in the government. But when you make a story, when you do a story, when someone, a common man, when he gets benefited, that's the true story, or that's a successful journalism or a successful story. I still remember where during the COVID times, when we were loitering around under the bridge, Yamuna Bridge, we did see almost 100 to 200 people taking shelter under the bridge. They didn't have a roof to take shelter. That was COVID first wave. That was the middle of lockdown, where almost 100 people were taking shelter under this particular bridge. There was no social distancing. I'm not sure, because they couldn't afford even food properly. They were eating from the nearby Gurudwara, so no question of them having sanitizers. So when we were loitering around, we just saw this people staying there. So we just went there. We spoke to them. We got their information saying that they were staying here for last 2 to 3 days because they were migrant workers. They didn't have any other place to take shelter. We just took a picture. We just put it out. We just collected the bites of 2 to 3 people, and then we played those bites on our channel. The very next day, the Delhi government took them to the nearby shelter home. This is real. This is one story that I will always be proud of. It's not the story that I broke, the CBI versus CBI, or how the government removed the CBI director, or the PM CAS, etc. But this story is something that I will always hold close to my chest, that this is something that we should always look for. Every story or any story that we intend to do, we should always keep in mind how this will benefit the people at large. Yeah, our job just to put the facts outside, but we should also have this responsibility that every story that we put out should benefit, should make a good impact on the society at large. That will make us as a good journalist. That gives us, as a journalist, like I said earlier, we won't get big paychecks, etc. But our bylines are our assets. We should always look for our bylines. You do a good story, people will recognize you. People will respect you, irrespective of in which channel. Let it be a regional channel, let it be a Tamil channel, let it be a Malayalam channel, let it be a Hindi channel, etc. But when you do a good journalism, people across the country will recognize you. When people start respecting you, when they see that you are doing good journalism, you will start developing more sources. Even with an hostile situation or an environment like us in NDTV, so many sources still call us and give us information because they trust the reporters. They think that we do good journalism. They take big risks by coming out of line and giving us the information, despite we being working at NDTV. It's because that as journalists, they respect us. They think that we do good journalism, and that's why they take this so much of risk to give us information. Always protect your source. Choose your source wisely. Once your source gives you information, cross-check it and then put it out. Always look for stories that benefits the society at large. I think that's it from me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. If anybody has any questions or anything.
Lakshmi, is there any question from the audience?
No, ma'am, actually.
Okay. So I think we can wind it up, sir. Thank
Okay.
you, Aravind and Jayaram sir. For a moment, I thought I'm listening to NDTV live.
Yes. Yes.
Aravind
I'm
does
so
the,
sorry.
no, it's we
No,
really
but I want to say one more thing. I want to add one more thing. Jayaram sir has been this mentor to most of us. I still remember, I think it was sometime in COVID, if I'm wrong, Jayaram sir can correct me. I did the story, and then the very first response I got was from Jayaram sir. In fact, he corrected me when I did the story. He said that this could have been done in this way or this particular way. That's something that this is the connect that we still all cherish in Amrita. It's been almost 8 years. Still, whenever I do a story, whenever it's a good story, I still get an appreciation or some kind of remarks or some kind of good message from Jayaram sir. And Jayaram sir, being our mentor, being our chairperson, still the same Jayaram sir, still corrects us whenever we go wrong. This is something that Amrita has actually given us, that we are so proud of, and we are so happy about. In fact, we are fortunate to have such mentors and professors in our career, which actually led this journey, led the foundation.
I suppose old
For our
habits
career.
die hard, and good work is always noticed. And I suppose if you are submitting an assignment like in the old days, probably for all the flattery you did now, I would have earned you some more marks. Thank you very much.
That's true.
It's wonderful, this thing. And thanks, Ashwati.
My pleasure, sir. Always. Thank you once again
Thank
to
you,
both
sir.
of you. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shall I close?
Yeah. Yes. Sir.
Okay, thanks.